Section A of the Great Divide Trail was where I got my first feeling for the character of the trail. I met some incredible people, I saw some amazing sights, and generally had a great time. I started to collect a bit of a trail family or a tramily, but unfortunately my schedule was such that all of those people would eventually leave me behind because they were moving much more quickly on the trail and were much more focused on getting through to the end of the trail within a prescribed time period. I covered a total of 157.8 kilometers. The highest point I reached was 2,520 meters, and I ascended a total of 5,692 meters in this section. So after spending 7 days in Montana hiking the Continental Divide Trail, I crossed over the international boundary into Canada on July 2nd. When I crossed the border, I called the number on the sign only to get into endless voicemail hell. Luckily, I had the number for the Chief Mountain Customs Station and phoned Customs Canada directly, gave them my information, told them I was a hiker coming back along Waterton Lake, gave them my passport number and my trip information, and after a few moments, I had a "Welcome back to Canada, sir." Gotta love that. Coming towards the town of Waterton Lake, I climbed a ridge, and from there I could see the town site and the Prince of Wales Hotel, which was a really welcome sight after 7 days in the bush. Civilization, it was great. Waterton town site is a bit of a tourist place with everything that implies. There were lots of coffee shops, there was a well-stocked outdoor store. I was able to get my laundry done and get things cleaned up, but unfortunately, there was a lack of basic supplies. I lost a needle to my repair kit and could not find a replacement anywhere in town. But fortunately, I found the candy store and I was able to get some Dutch salt licorice and some fudge and some Belgian chocolate to help me ascend those mountain passes later on. So that was most welcome. I went into the Waterton Lakes Interpretive Center and I noticed a rather scruffy hiker in the lounge area at the back of the interpretive center with his phone plugged into the wall, and he looked like a thru hiker. I went up and introduced myself, and he said his name was Strider. This was the same person that I'd heard about from all of the other thru hikers in Montana on the Continental Divide Trail. I had mentioned to them that I was hiking north into Canada, and they said, yes, so is Strider. I figured somebody with the name of Strider I would never catch up to, but here he was. So I got to know him a little bit, and yeah, he was continuing on, but his pace was much faster than mine, so I had serious doubts I was going to see very much of him in the next few days. A few minutes later, along came two other thru hikers named Fun Size and Shake and Bake, and they too were beginning the Great Divide Trail from Waterton the next day. They were planning on doing some sections of the Great Divide Trail and then helping out volunteering for the Great Divide Trail Association, which was hosting work parties to the north of us to build some new sections of trail. So they volunteered with the GDTA and were working hard to get the trail improved for more hikers in the future. The weather that day was quite unpredictable and went from full sun to torrential rain to hailstorms and back to sun within a few hours. I got to test out my tent, and I was quite confident that I was going to be able to handle any weather that the Rocky Mountains were going to throw out at me. My second day of rest in Waterton consisted of getting my shoes dried and getting some repairs done and working on my first video and getting it uploaded to YouTube. Today started with a latte and some watermelon walnut loaf from the Windflower Cafe in Waterton. Ahead of me in line was Strider. And true to form, he had his phone plugged in, trying to get some very last electrons before he headed out on the trail as well. And heading out on section A. Hands full. It's not been an auspicious start so far. I forgot my hiking poles at the Windflower Cafe. Great coffee there, by the way. About an hour later, Strider passed me, and that was the last I ever saw of him. Later on that day, I was passed by some other thru hikers, including Allie and Rick and their dog Ruby, who were hiking the trail. Ruby had saddlebags on, was taking the trail like a pro. And later on, I was passed by a fellow named Drew, who was quite delighted to discover that he was the oldest person on the trail starting that day. So the highlight of that day was Carthew Summit, where a knife-back ridge extends out to a promontory. I confronted my fear of heights and walked out to the promontory, where I found Rick and Allie and their dog having some lunch, finishing up. I decided to do the same because the view was stupendous. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I started to feel ill, so I decided to head down. I figured it was the elevation, so I headed down towards Cameron Lake and felt better after just a few minutes at a lower elevation. Cameron Lake is a popular summer destination. It's served by a road, so there's a lot of people, a lot of cars, and a lot of hubbub there. It was a short road walk, and then walk on a trail over a ridge into British Columbia and the Akamina Creek campsite, where we stayed for the night. At the Akamina Creek site, a whole bunch of us rendezvoused, the people I had met before, Drew and Rick and Allie and their dog, Shake and Bake, Fun Size, Todd and Sue, a couple I hadn't met before, and the only person missing from the group was Strider, who had continued on to the next site already. After a while, a friend of Shake and Bake and Fun Size named Keiko arrived. She brought beer, so that was pretty impressive. Hiked in to bring beer to us. Keiko met Fun Size and Shake and Bake through the Great Divide Trail Association. She's another volunteer with the group who works to build and maintain the trails in the area. So from Akamina Creek, we had to retrace our steps back across the ridge and thus the border into Alberta. And then there was a bit of a road walk again to the next trailhead. Unfortunately, Rick and Allie had to stop at this point. Their dog became quite ill and they had to take it to a vet. So that kind of put a crimp in their plans. We then began our ascent to Lynham Ridge. So the views at Lynham Ridge Summit, 2,520 meters, were quite astounding. There was an extended period at elevation, but I avoided lingering there because of my experience the previous day at Carthew Summit. So I took my pictures and got down off the ridge as soon as I could. We're at Lynham Ridge Summit on our way down to Lone Lake. And this is the highest point for quite a while. And I feel like I'm on top of the world. Pretty interesting place. Scary as hell, though, when you're afraid of heights like me. What an incredible spot. I don't want to step any further in this direction because there's a sheer cliff. So thank you very much. Just have to make it down now. No problem with that. Really? And that's Mount Vestibert. Coming down to this saddle. And that's where I have to go. Lone Lake is quite a beautiful campsite. It's a tiny lake at the foot of Vestibert Mountain, 2,522 meters. So this morning we got up and were treated to this amazing view of Vestibert Mountain being reflected in the calm waters of Lone Lake. It made for a beautiful photo, and well, there it is for you. Today's hike featured some amazing vistas and some really interesting geology, so I'm going to let the photographs speak for themselves. I'm hiking in paradise. Beautiful alpine meadow, beautiful mountains all around, sunny, warm day, not too much wind. It's all good. Wouldn't it be nice if every day in life could be like this? At the Twin Lakes campsite, I found Drew and Keiko, of all people, enjoying a snack. Keiko was not actually on the GDT hiking with us, but just appeared out of nowhere. She'd come in from a side road. And I had mentioned at the previous site that I was missing a sewing needle, which I couldn't buy in Waterton. Well, she pulled out a sewing needle from her kit and gave it to me. So thank you again, Keiko. I had planned to camp at Jutland Creek that night, but Shake and Bake and Fun Size convinced me that it was a better idea to continue on to Scarp Pass, which was higher and further along the trail. That put us in a better position for the ascent to Lac Loulotte Ridge the following day. Today was a very difficult ascent of Lac Loulotte Ridge. The main peak, 2,438 meters, was followed by two subsequent smaller peaks. The hiking was technically challenging. There were places where cliffs had to be avoided and routed around. The trail was poorly marked in places, and in some places you would be walking along the trail and realize that you were adjacent to a cliff and you could look straight down 1,000 meters to your right, which was just terrifying. Nice trail down the ridge. I've made it to the first peak on Lac Loulotte. Elevation here is 2,438 meters. So a bit of a climb since this morning. All around me, just the glory of the Canadian Rockies. It's just amazing. I knew this was going to be spectacular, but you know, it's nothing compared to what I was expecting. Just way, way beyond. Needless to say, it was a long and hard day, and we only covered about 5 kilometers. I was very happy to get off that ridge and get onto a logging road which led to lower elevations and headed towards Castle Mountain. Because of the difficulty that day, I didn't make my objective of West Castle River for camp that night. Instead, I camped along the edge of the logging road at an unnamed creek and was quite happy to put my head on a pillow and go to sleep that night. After the previous day's terror at Lac Loulotte, the trail rapidly became much more tame, and there was a lot of road walking this day. Basically, our objective was Lynx Creek, which was an Alberta provincial campsite. Shake and Bake and Fun Size were the first to arrive there, and because there were no limitations on the number of tents per campsite, they set up first and allowed the rest of us who were on the trail with them to camp at the site as well. The campsite at Lynx Creek was quite expensive, and I offered to Shake and Bake to pay for half of it, and he said that I could pay for half a beer instead when we reached Coleman the next day. So we were all eager to break camp that morning to reach Coleman. We all left early. I had to go into Blairmore for some supplies. So I took the alternate route into Blairmore, which is only a few kilometers away from Coleman. I found a store on the main street that sold gelato by the pint. So I bought a $12 pint of black cherry gelato and popped it open on the sidewalk and ate it as I went to the grocery store. An entire pint of gelato gone in about 10 minutes. But you know, it was very hot that day, about 37, 39 Celsius. So, yeah, it was good. Got to the IGA, bought my groceries, and then had to huff it from Blairmore to Coleman, which was about 3 kilometers. And that was very hot and very long. When I got to Coleman, my bed and breakfast reservation was ready, and I went to Country Encounters Bed and Breakfast and was pleasantly surprised to find they had this giant air conditioning unit in my room to keep it cool, as well as a big old clawfoot tub. And I made good use of that to clean up for the first time in days. It was wonderful. My plan today had been to reach McGilvery Creek staging area, but I decided instead to spend an extra day at Country Encounters. Breakfast consisted of coffee, orange juice, yogurt, fresh fruit, pancakes, sausages, and scrambled eggs. These guys really know how to deal with hiker hunger, and they treat you like royalty. Fun size, Shake and Bake, Rob and Maria had all decided to get together to have lunch at the Rum Runner pub. So I had a burger there, and I swear it was one of the best burgers I've ever had, and that's not just hiker hunger talking. It was quite amazing. I bought Shake and Bake a full beer in exchange for paying for half of the campsite. I think that's fair. Unfortunately, we missed Drew because we forgot to get his contact information, so that was a lesson for future meetings with thru hikers to always get their information as soon as you meet them. So I left Coleman the next day full of trepidation and anticipation of the challenges that I would face and the amazing things that I would see on Section B of the trail. Most of my trail family had moved on already, and so I would be facing Section B basically alone, with nobody to help me to provide beer at strategic places or sewing needles or other supplies when I lost things. So I had to be much more careful on the following sections of the trail. But it was a good way to start, a good way to learn a little bit about the trail and figure out what it was all about in preparation for the following sections. Woohoo! There we go. A little more masculine. All right. Have a great day.